Welcome to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 8 p.m. Eastern until midnight, right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Starcom Radio Network, Digital Broadcast Network, and Digital Satellite Network. 1-800-610-7035, worldwide toll-free. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. And our main radio website, where you can listen to the X Zone live Monday through Friday from 8 until midnight. And the rest of the time, we play the best of X Zone shows from over the years, going back as far as 1997. So during that time, you hear some of the greats who are no longer with us. Zachariah Sitchin, Bud Hopkins, Neil Armstrong, Glenn Kimball, just to name a few. That's www.xzoneradiotv.com. X Zone Nation, my first guest tonight is Adam Smith. And he has studied astrology for 25 years and has a degree in comparative religions. He is based in London, England, and now practices primarily Vedic astrology alongside familiar Western astrology. Adam has edited all the main UK astrological journals, and his work, he also has been featured in magazines around the world, including BBC magazines, the Daily Mirror, the Daily Mail. His weekly column in the Sydney Sun-Herald and Melbourne Telegraph in Australia appeared for 7 years with a combined weekly audience of over 1 million readers. His book, Saturn, Fatal Attraction, was published in 2007. Adam's yoga and meditation practice also dates back to 1985. Today he works directly with astrologers in India to offer a range of authentic Vedic astrology consultations and services. His website is astrovedas.com. That's astrovedas.com. And Adam Smith, welcome to the X Zone.
Rob, thanks so much for having me.
It's great having you with us, my friend. What started you on your journey to become the astrologer you are today?
Oh, well, I can remember from when I was a child, about 9 years old or something, listening to some grown-ups talking about star signs. Maybe they were just reading their column in the paper or something like that. And just the names of the signs sounded so fantastic, so wise, so exotic or something. And I was just fascinated by that point. I didn't understand any of it, but it just hooked me in right there. And so that was my first memory of people talking about astrology. And then a few years later, I began studying at a local class near me in London. There's quite a lot of astrology goes on in London. And I never sort of thought, hey, this is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. But it just started a thread right there. So I started off quite early. And I've always been fascinated by the whole, it's such a vast subject. You never learn it all. There's always something new to learn. And that's what got me going, really.
What is the history of astrology? Where did it start? When did it start?
Oh, well, there's a lot of controversy about that, a lot of speculation. The Western astrology that most of us study, the familiar model that we have of 12 signs and so on.
Right.
The Western opinion tends to be that it derives from Persia, from ancient Greece, Mediterranean region. But Indian astrologers would contend that it goes back much further than that. We tend to think in the West that all culture and enlightenment and progress tends to come from the West inevitably, but the Indians would have a take on it that their culture is also extremely ancient. So who did what first? It's a big question, but it's lost in the mists of time.
How does it work? Like date of birth, place of birth, time of birth.
Yeah.
And you do your calculations, you look at your star charts, and you come up with this fascinating information that knocks people on their butts because it's pretty darn precise.
Yeah. And the premise of it is that there is that time itself has qualities and characteristics. Time isn't just one event after the other, just a random sequence of events. It actually has certain qualities, and that each moment of time, each event in each moment of time is imbued with certain qualities. And so it's all that timing itself is sacred in a sense. So the moment that you were born, the moment that you came into this world and became an independent person, then there's a blueprint which is derived from the timing of that moment, and that's the basic premise of astrology.
Let me ask you a hypothetical question here. Let's say somebody dies and they are reincarnated. Does their past astrological chart play any part of their new life?
Well, if that system of knowledge is meaningful for you, I mean, if that's a kind of a philosophical background that you believe in, then certainly the astrology may say something about their karmic history, about their karmic past, but really what you're dealing with in terms of the basic natal chart, the basic horoscope, is your life here and now. That's about your future karma, your future events, your future history. Whereas your previous incarnation may show up in some aspects of your chart in terms of the sort of the aggregate of your past lifetimes, not just your one previous life. Your whole karmic history would show up to some degree, but really what you're dealing with in astrology is the present here and now.
How is a personal consultation different to pop astrology?
Pop astrology is what we get in the newspapers. That's, I am this sign, I am Virgo, I am Pisces, I am Aries, I am this, I am that. And it's basically a bite-sized piece of information. Basically, sun sign columns, horoscope columns are like advertising copy. It's like sort of saying, this is just my little take on the day. This is something which I read over a cup of coffee in the morning. Whereas a full consultation, a full sit-down session based on your, time, date, and place of birth, the whole chart, is more like a sort of a 4 or 5 course tasting menu. That's a full meal, where you can really, really explore the issues, and it becomes much more personalized. When you read the pop astrology, it's about just the generalized 12 categories of people based on one planet, which is the sun. So it's the position of the sun in each given sign. So you're reading, your little segment on that, and that's fine as far as it goes. I mean, it might contain a little nugget of information in that particular segment that day, or that week or month, that gives you an insight into the future, might inspire you to look further into astrology. There's nothing wrong with that. But then hopefully the real session, the real knowledge comes when you sit down one-to-one with an astrologer who really gives it to you in terms of your personal moment of birth, and can be much, much more expansive.
How do you deal with skepticism?
Skeptics, I mean, astrology is one of those subjects that everybody's an expert. Whether you've studied it or not, everybody seems to have an opinion about astrology, and they'll say, oh yes, but this is, how can it be true if it's only based on, everybody's based under the same sign. So as much as I'm saying that pop astrology has its place, it also gives skeptics a stick to beat us with, because it is, it's a very simplified form, which was basically got up by newspaper editors to give a very kind of generalized picture for everybody. Just something very simple where you didn't have to think about it too much. Everybody can be nice and easily categorized. So skeptics tend to think that astrologers don't know these things, and they tend to think that we don't know our astronomy, we don't know our history, we don't know our philosophy, and so on. And even skeptics who are, very scientific and very, much more learned, you might say, very often they haven't studied astrology itself. They might have studied science, they might have studied astronomy, but they haven't necessarily studied astrology. And for a lot of people, astrology is kind of like the lingua franca of the kind of woo-woo. It's the epitome of everything that we're not supposed to believe in as intelligent thinking, skeptical people. And the other thing is that most skeptics who call themselves skeptics, a skeptic with a capital S, if you like, are anything but. A skeptic tends to mean somebody who is open-minded and who is questioning, and that is absolutely admirable.
Sure it is.
But somebody who calls himself a skeptic, for the most part, is usually they absolutely convinced in what they believe, and they're very sure about their belief and tend to be very dogmatic, in fact.
Adam, what is the difference between Vedic astrology and Western astrology?
Western astrology, the signs and so forth, one of the main differences in the slightly different zodiacal reference point. Basically, Western astrology, the astrology that most of us are familiar with, takes its reference point from the beginning of spring. So on or about the 21st of March, the zodiac begins where the sign of Aries starts. But this reference point is actually astronomically moving back ever so slightly. There's this thing called the precession of the equinoxes. So Vedic astrology takes this movement into account. And so for most people, the signs that we're familiar with, you think, well, I'm Libra, I'm Scorpio, I'm this, would tend to be the previous sign. So it's actually a slightly different reference point there. That's one of the main differences, that the actual astronomy of it, the whole layout of it, is actually slightly different. But also it uses different techniques. There are probably more exhaustive techniques for looking into the future, for making predictions, for analyzing people's strengths and weaknesses and qualities and characteristics and potential and so on. And most people would say that it tends to be slightly more predictively oriented. There are many differences, in fact. There's, it also goes into the whole lifestyle which is associated with astrology. So it isn't just prediction, it isn't just analysis, but there is actually a lifestyle associated with it in terms of doing things on certain days and your behavior and so on, which is tends to be more analyzed in terms of Vedic astrology. So it comes from the yoga tradition.
I see.
So yoga is everywhere now, as we know. As you know, aerobics used to be. Now everybody's doing yoga, and Vedic astrology comes from the same tradition as yoga. So there's a lot of associations between yoga and astrology. And I think that, and as much as everybody's doing asanas now, they're doing bending and stretching and exercise and so on in terms of yoga. I think that Vedic astrology will become, a part of this lifestyle that everybody seems to be embracing at the moment, and it will just be one more element to this lifestyle.
Why are there so many astrologers in London?
I don't know exactly. I think it's the climate is relatively liberal over here. To be honest, astrology is kind of tolerated more than embraced by, you might say, the establishment. It's kind of, well, if it's not hurting anybody, let them do it. Even if maybe, some academic circles don't necessarily take it altogether seriously. Although it is studied at university level to an extent.
Right.
The history, the philosophy of it, its role in various religions as a divinatory practice is available to be studied here at university level. But it's, I think it's, there's a tradition of astrology in this country that goes back, many centuries, and it just seems to be part of the culture here. And actually astrologers from other countries do sort of appreciate that actually in London in particular, there does seem to be a very wide variety of astrological schools, be it Western, be it yogic, be it Vedic. And it just seems to be a bit of a hub in terms of astrological study. The UK in general and London in particular.
What happens when a new planet is discovered? For example, Let's look at Pluto. It was downgraded from a planet. How does that affect the astrological charts, if it does?
Yeah, good question. I don't think that it's. I've been watching a lot of astrologers and their opinion about how Pluto was first of all classified as a planet, then a dwarf planet, then it was back to a planet again, and it's been backwards and forwards a couple of times. To me, it doesn't really matter. I mean, what does it matter what you're actually calling it? The point is actually, does it making an effect? And does calling it a dwarf planet actually diminish its effect? No. But the point is that Pluto is the third in the line of recently discovered planets from what we said, the classical seven, which were up into Saturn, up until the late 18th century, where first of all Uranus was discovered, then they discovered Neptune in the mid-19th century, then Pluto in about 1930 was discovered. And those are Western discoveries. Those planets are really jewels in the crown of Western astrology. And they have, I think, enhanced, or they've augmented the interpretation. And some would say that they have come to symbolize modern life. They've come, Pluto, for example, the example you mentioned, represents plutonium. So now we're living in the nuclear age, and we didn't have a symbol specifically for plutonium or for nuclear energy before Pluto came along, some would argue. Neptune, it came along, it was discovered around the time that communism came along, and so it represented Marxism and so on. And Uranus was electricity and sort of the modern kind of technology and so on. So these new symbols have come to sort of represent either new energies, or they've kind of fine-tuned the symbolism that we had before there. And not everybody uses them, not everybody embraces them, but I personally think that they stand up. I think that they punch their weight symbolically, and that they're a valuable addition to, astrology.
What would it take for something to change the astrological charts that you've been using for so many years? What would have to happen within the universe? I don't know. I mean, that's a real sort of left field. Yeah. That's a real hypothetical. I mean, planets would literally have to change out of their orbits. I mean, the Earth would have to be knocked off its axis or something, really, for the whole astrological model not to work or to change that substantially. Or there would have to be some real cataclysmic event to really throw the whole thing out of whack. Can planets be used as a remedy, as a healing art? How?
Yeah. If you're accepting the whole premise of astrology, then it goes down to the minutest level of life. As I said, Vedic astrology in particular is a lifestyle, and so traditionally, like the days of the week, for example, were named for the planets. There's the Sun day, there's the Moon day, then Tuesday is for Mars, Wednesday is for Mercury, Thursday is for Jupiter, Friday is for Venus, and Saturday is for Saturn. That is universal in many, many traditions, and it's the same in India. It's the same correspondence. So at its simplest, you could say that for matters to do with a given planet, so say matters to do with, where are we today? Wednesday.
Yeah.
So this would be a good day for all matters concerned with Mercury. It would be a good day for communication, for writing, for speaking, for putting your message across, for sales, for interviews, for putting your pitch across. All these kind of bits of business would tend to go better on a Wednesday. That's very, very simplistic. But you could say that that's also that if you had a problem with your chart, with your Mercury, to do with your speech or your thoughts or your writing or whatever, that you might want to do something on a Wednesday. You might want to try and heal yourself or to undertake something on a Wednesday to make things go more smoothly. So that's a kind of very, very simple form of healing, but that's an example of how prevalent or how widespread the influence of the planets goes, on how fundamental it is and how it applies down to the the most basic level of life.
One of the,
sorry, go on.
One of the phrases that we hear a lot here in this business is Mercury is in retrograde. What does that mean?
Mercury is in retrograde now, right? It goes back direct again on Friday. It's been retrograde for the last 3 weeks nearly. And this is not an unusual event. Mercury goes retrograde for about 3 weeks at a time, 3 times a year. And it doesn't actually go backwards. It's just a phenomenon about Mercury in relation to the Earth. It's just when Mercury is at a slow point in its orbit, and it's kind of like the impression you get when you're on a slow train being overtaken by a faster one.
Oh, right, yeah.
And it makes you feel as if you're actually going backwards.
Yeah.
Whereas it's just that the other train is moving faster, and it just makes you seem like it. So Mercury just seems like it's going backwards because its orbit is elliptical. But basically, so this happens 3 times a year, 3 weeks at a time, and Mercury is to do with communication. So particularly during these periods, communication can get a little bit confused sometimes. Often it's when a parcel is delayed, a message is delayed, information is slowed down. You have trouble with your computer sometimes. It can be business to do with just messages and getting crossed wires and purchases. And it's like when you buy your new gizmo, it turns out it isn't compatible. You buy a new piece of furniture, it doesn't fit through the door.
Right.
You buy something and it turns out, you bought A, you should have bought B, but you didn't know that at the time. You didn't know it until after you put your money down. And there's just these kind of weird, sort of quirky kind of things that tend to happen under Mercury retrograde. But it doesn't mean to say the bottom's going to drop out of your life. Like I say, this is not an unusual event.
Right.
So it's good to be aware of it. And people say that you shouldn't make irrevocable decisions. You shouldn't sign on the line during Mercury retrograde. You shouldn't make a major purchase, particularly to do with, if it's a phone or if it's a computer or something like this. What also happens under Mercury retrograde often is people come back into your life, or you're turning your jacket out, a phone number falls out of your pocket. You think, oh, I forgot about that. Somebody's business card that you completely forgot about drops into your lap, and you think, oh, yes, I'll pursue that. And you kind of take a little detour during Mercury retrograde, and it takes you down a path that you wouldn't have gone down otherwise. And then when Mercury goes direct again, about 3 weeks later, you sort of evaluate the whole thing. So while you're not buying stuff or committing yourself, you're doing your window shopping, you're doing your research, and then you can really commit yourself when Mercury goes direct again. So everybody, on Saturday, the coast is clear. It's safe to go out shopping. It's safe to commit yourself. You can sign on the line for whatever you like. And you can do it without the fear of kind of being blindsided by Mercury retrograde.
What, if any, has been the weirdest chart you've ever done? Has there ever been a time when you've done a chart and you've looked at the chart and say, oh, this can't be? There's some pretty stiff competition there. I mean, there's a lot of, there's some pretty strange events, and it's not the sort of it's not the person, but sometimes sometimes you get a series of, all astrologers will tell you this, that you go through a phase of reading people's charts who've all got very similar kind of issues. Or you go to an event, for example, where you're reading for a number of people in an evening, say, and it might be a fundraiser for this, it might be an event for that, it might be, or you just see a common thread running through all of these charts, and you think, what's going on here? This is kind of strange. And there's all these kind of slightly kind of quirky, fated events that you tend to get when you read a bunch of charts together. That's often quite strange. Or you just get symbolism sometimes which just describes something very, very exactly, which you wouldn't necessarily have expected, or unexpected events, right? That's the astrologer's joke, unforeseen circumstances. But there's all kinds of strange things. And also people will sometimes go to an astrologer when
they wouldn't necessarily go to somebody else. They wouldn't necessarily take their issue or their question, because people are looking for meaning. They're looking for meaning. They're looking to understand the world, their environment, their situation. And often you come across situations that, and people talking to you about stuff that they wouldn't necessarily talk to many people about.
So I guess when you go to an astrologer, you have faith. You believe in the astrologer. It's not like, walking down the street seeing a psychic and you sit down and have a good laugh. But like you and I were talking about before coming on air, that the public attitude towards astrology and astrologers like yourself has changed so much in the past years.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. I mean, I don't know to what extent people do believe in it. I suppose people are, again, I think people are looking for meaning, and they're looking for some kind of an answer. But you do get people who are coming along who are very skeptical. Classically, traditionally, the sort of the ancient texts, if you like, tell us not to deal with people who are excessively skeptical. Sometimes you do get people coming along who are just basically trying to trip you up, or who are trying to just catch you out, or who are coming along for idle curiosity. Usually there is, there is expected to be a certain amount of engagement there.
Right.
Because people also, there's no use someone coming along to an astrologer who just wants you to sit there and tell them what they want to hear. Mm-hmm. You have to be, you have to tell the sweet truth. You have to be honest. You have to be straightforward. And I don't know. I mean, but absolute blind faith, no. I mean, that's the opposite extreme. I think people have to be sort of reasonably inquiring, reasonably skeptical, reasonably questioning, and intelligent. But it's, there's a kind of like a compact that goes on, because it isn't just the astrologer just laying down the law, really. Really, it should be some kind of a dialogue with the client also wanting to participate in the experience too.
All right, Adam, please stand by. You and I have to take the news break at the bottom of the hour. Exo Nation, my guest this hour, all the way from London, England, to us via Skype is Adam Smith. If you'd like to contact Adam for a one-on-one consultation, visit his website at astrovedas.com. That's astrovedas.com. Adam and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. Adam Smith is my guest. We'll both be back on the other side. Don't go away.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com.
What if Jesus came back now and insisted that we listen to him? How would the world be different if Christians really followed the Gospels? For 2,000 years, we've been practicing a religion. Now it's finally time to get it right. Read Liberating Jesus, new from Roberta Grimes. Meet the Jesus you never knew. Roberta uses afterlife evidence and biblical analysis to prove that Jesus is exactly right. Learning the lessons that he came to teach is the reason we are born at all. Roberta says he has come back now to insist that we actually listen to him so we can begin to use his teachings to unite and transform the world. Liberating Jesus on Amazon, October 1st, and then wherever books are sold. Jesus has the answers, and it's not too late. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Good real estate websites are not just about showing listings, but offering visitors valuable information about neighborhoods, market statistics, tips, and personal insights. Luckily, you will find that on Roost, but you won't on many other real estate websites in Budapest. That's why we created Roost. Roost is a website with tailored results for the foreign investor, curated by Hungarian-loving expats who found their home abroad and decided to roost in Budapest. Let Roost help you get started on the right foot. Whether you intend to live, work, play, retire, or simply invest abroad, Roost offers all types of properties in Budapest, from affordable studios to luxury homes. From neighborhood insights like where to grab a great coffee or how to buy property, our team of local experts can answer your questions and speak to the direct concerns of a foreign investor. Buying foreign property is an exciting and complex adventure. It can also be very time-consuming and costly if you don't have the best information and resources at hand. Roost provides professional real estate services and assistance to an international clientele of foreign property investors and rental apartment owners in Budapest. For more information on Roost, visit their website at www.roost.co. That's www.rooste.co. The Carl O. Helvey Holistic Cancer Foundation is a new nonprofit foundation that focuses on a holistic approach to cancer that includes physical, mental, spiritual, and political aspects. Cancer education, research, and care are provided for all types of cancer patients. You can listen to interviews with cancer doctors and survivors and read research on holistic aspects of cancer at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com. That's www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money and abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right, transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
Welcome back, everyone. Astrology is the order of business this first hour here in the X-Zone. Our guest is Adam Smith, and his website is astrovedas.com. Adam, you've been at this for 25 years, and what would you tell someone who was thinking about becoming an astrologer?
I think it's a bit of a calling. It's a vocation. It's not necessarily for everybody. Although I was influenced by a book that I read early on, which was 60 Ways to Avoid Becoming an Accountant, and astrology was one of the vocational options in this book. But it's something that I think it tends to choose you, if that's not a kind of a bit of a grand kind of way of looking at it. It is a kind of an offbeat thing, but if if you feel drawn to it, then study as much as you can. There are many schools. There's many opportunities to study now. The internet has been an absolute kind of godsend for astrology, really, and computers. I mean, having your home sort of PC now. When I first got going, it was all analog back in those days. You had to draw charts by hand. It would take you about an hour just to get a horoscope up in front of you.
Wow.
Now you just press a couple of buttons and it's all there, and you can just deconstruct the horoscope in 6 ways from Sunday just from pressing a few keys. Computers have been the biggest leap forward for astrology since they invented the telescope, basically. So there's many online facilities. There's so many, chat rooms, blogs, and information coming at you. There's no shortage of information there. So I would say go for it. I think that lifestyle, I think that personal unfoldment, self-discovery is going to become a growth industry. As sort of conventional business, is changing very much. That's very much the story of our time at the moment.
Yeah.
I think, the world needs more astrologers.
What are some of the best applications for astrology?
How do you mean, sorry?
Well, let's see. Who would benefit by using astrology? I mean, besides the day-to-day reader of a newspaper, but who would use astrology in business, for example?
Many people use. There are certainly business. There are economic advisors in astrology. There are stock market astrologers who predict trends in the markets and so on. There are indicators for growth, indicators for slowing down and so on. There's many people who I can't remember who it was, but somebody said it's not. It might have been J.P. Morgan who said millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. And traditionally, it's always been the sort of the upper crust, if you like, the rulers, the elite, who've tended to rely on astrological advice. But it applies down to every walk of life, and there are every kind of situation. So whether you're predicting sports events, whether you like to have a bet or something like that, you like to you're into racing or the horses. From this down to people. But really, this is the people who benefit most of all from astrology. You asked me earlier on about it being a healing art.
Yes.
Because just the business of going to an astrologer, having an astrological reading is healing in itself. And just understanding a little bit about your place in the world and understanding the world in terms of cycles, in terms of just seeing that you might be in the midst of a difficult time. Mm-hmm. And you thinking, and we all get to this point sometimes. You think, how did I get here? When's this going to stop? And with the astrology there, it's like a roadmap at your elbow. You see, well, actually, it came. It's going to be here for a while, and it's going to move on. Nothing is irrevocable. It's all transitory. It's all moving on. It's all part of a cycle. And then if it's in certain cycles, you can see, well, I was going through a similar time to this, maybe 2 years ago, 12 years ago, 30 years ago, and I can see parallels with certain times in my life. And just knowing that, it's enormously comforting. It's enormously affirming. And just the business of going to somebody and having your life put in a certain perspective like this, many people find that report that as having a very kind of healing and wholesome effect. So there are specific applications for astrology, but really for most people, it's just getting a sense of perspective on where they are in their lives.
Would parents benefit by giving you the date of birth, time of birth, and place of birth of their children to help them better guide the child based on his astrological chart, where his strong points would be in life? Yeah.
Absolutely. And in many traditions, I mean, in India certainly, that's widely practiced. In the UK, for example, we don't note down the birth time of children unless they're twins.
Really?
So I think it's a mark of a civilized country if you actually there's an accurate birth time taken, because you do need to know the time. People say, does it make a difference? Yes, it absolutely does. But knowing about a child's vocation, their aptitudes, you can be very, very precise. You can see, why they're going for a certain direction in life. It can tell you about their relationships, about how they're inclined to see their parents, their relationship with their parents, their relationship with their siblings, relationship with all kinds of people, and the path that they'll be drawn to in life. And so if, the father has aspirations for the boy to be a footballer, or to be this, or to be that, or to go into business, to follow him into the city, and the kid wants to be a ballet dancer, then from the astrology, you can see why this is, and it helps everybody to be more tolerant. And I think that this kind of knowledge would basically make the world a better place.
I would also imagine that a person in charge of a human resource department of a company, a corporation, a manufacturing plant industry would also use this to their advantage.
I think it's coming. I mean, I may be a little over-optimistic, but I think that this, compared to sort of some of the corporate systems like, say, Myers-Briggs, for example, I think is very, very primitive compared to the sophistication and complexity of astrology, the potential that you've got there to unlock people's potential, their talents and their aptitudes and so on. It's an absolutely priceless tool for all of that.
Let's see, 3 years ago, the world of the New Age genre was holding their breath on December the 21st, 2012, because of the end of the Mayan calendar. You, as a professional astrologer, what did you make of that date, way prior to it even, coming around?
Well, I was doing yearly forecasts, and the thing about 2012 came up, and I thought, well, will I be doing my yearly forecast for 2013? Was it going to come to that? I think it was a bit of one of these kind of slightly sensationalist. It is based on a real phenomenon based on the Mayan calendar, and there are parallels with this date in other traditions. I think it was never going to be the end of times. It was never going to be some apocalyptic event. All it was the one system of counting came to an end, and it was going to be replaced by another system. So it was a transition point. Was it really 3 years ago? I don't know whether it seems like longer or shorter ago than
2012, December 21st, 2012.
Yeah.
So 3 years.
I can't believe it. We're 3 years past that already. But I think it became rather sensationalized. And again, a little learning is a dangerous thing. I mean, you were asking about skeptics earlier on. It's some of these things, and a bit like sort of Mercury retrograde. Is the bottom going to drop out of my life because Mercury's retrograde? Should I just stay in bed all day? It's all of these things. They tend to get a little bit sensationalized, but it was actually based on a legitimate calendar measurement, and I do think that in some ways that it has signified a change that we will see over the course of our lifetimes. And I do think that we're living in a very rapidly changing world, as is being seen by the amount of maybe astrology, shows like the X Zone and yoga being practiced around the world, people's lifestyle changing, the focus moving more towards self-realization rather than just going out there and having a job, basically. So I think that 2012 was actually, in many senses, a legitimate turning point, although it was never going to be the end of the world.
Yeah. Do you find that people are changing the reasons why they're coming to you?
Hopefully they become more sophisticated. I think that because there's more astrology around, again, it's not that people are coming, when am I going to meet someone? Have you got some lottery tips for me?
Buy a ticket.
That's what astrologers aren't interested in doing so much. But I think generally, if people are prepared to come and participate in the reading, and they say, well, it isn't all just down to the astrologist sort of, giving them lifestyle advice and sort of saying, this is what you should do. If the person is prepared to kind of meet the astrology halfway and, again, participate in it and be a little bit more skeptical and a bit more sophisticated, hopefully the clients are starting to get a little bit more kind of savvy about it, and that's good for everybody, basically.
Exonation, my guest this hour is Adam Smith. He is an astrologer in London, England. His website is astrovedis.com. And Andrew, what, in your opinion, is the strongest astrological sign and the weakest?
The strongest, it depends on the context,
Okay.
because most of us know our sun sign. So when you ask somebody what your sign is, you say, "Oh, I'm this, I'm that." That's based on the position of the sun. But there's also the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and the outer planets. So depending on which planet is in one of these, certain planets sit well in certain signs, certain planets sit not so well in other signs. So for sun signs, the sun likes to be in Aries and in Leo, but it depends on the context. If that's not evading the question, or that's not too kind of
No, it's not evading it. It's being honest.
slippery. If that's not a slippery answer, then certain signs work well for certain planets, and so they're all potentially very strong, and they all have their certain strengths in certain situations.
What is the best and what is the worst thing about being an astrologer?
The best thing is you can help people. The best thing is when you've done a reading where they've benefited, where the client has benefited from it, you've appreciated, you've learned something from the session, and everybody's won. The worst thing does tend to be the skeptical attitude that goes with it, particularly when it's skeptics who actually think they know what they're talking about but don't. Again, they may be very eminent, they may be very enlightened in their own field, but they invariably have not studied astrology. There are relatively few people, I suspect, who have really studied astrology in any depth who remain completely skeptical about that it has no use whatsoever. But you do tend to get this kind of very condescending attitude. And again, it's unfortunate that astrology has come to represent, in many ways, because of its popularity perhaps, everything that we're kind of as cynical, skeptical people that we're not supposed to believe in. So I think any astrology would tell you that that's the hardest thing that we have to deal with in doing what we do.
It's really amazing, because as I was saying earlier tonight, I can't understand how just by knowing the date, the time, and the place of birth, that astrologers like yourself get the information so darn correct. It's right on.
Well, I'm glad you think that way. I mean, I think that, and I would say that anybody, be they ever so skeptical, who had all the astrologer basically needs is an accurate time of birth. It's possible to work it out, by the way, but if you come to the astrologer and say, this is my time, date, and place of birth, I think that I defy anybody not to be in some way won over by the accuracy, the depth of the information that can be provided. And in some ways, it's hard to prove astrology, but you can actually demonstrate it. You can't necessarily explain how it works. It's highly esoteric, but you can demonstrate it quite easily. And I think that you would have to be very perverse-minded not to be won over to some degree by astrology's claims.
How many different types of astrology are there?
As many different as there are astrologers practicing them, really. I mean,
really?
Everybody's approach is ever so slightly different. But there is astrology of asking questions, which is called horary astrology. You have electional astrology, which is determining a propitious moment to undertake certain actions. You've got Vedic astrology. You've got so-called traditional astrology, which comes specifically from Greece and from ancient Arabic sources. There's mundane astrology, which is the astrology of politics and world events. There's many different applications. It's a language for life, basically. So you can find different ways of applying astrology in all different kinds of stripes, really.
Now, you do, I would imagine you do astrological charts over the internet. And how would somebody contact you? Would they go to your website?
come to the website. There's information about me, about the services that AstroVedas offers. There's both consultations, there's Vedic chanting performed by Vedic experts, Brahmin pundits in India, which is an integral part of Vedic astrology. So again, it's not just the consultation, but there's other services associated with it. If you send me your time, date, and place of birth, I can read for you by Skype, or if you're in London, obviously, I can read for you one-to-one over the phone. It's a worldwide business these days, and it's always good to hear from people. We've got a blog going here, but one-to-one astrology is really where the good stuff happens.
Where does the chanting come in?
That's a very traditional Indian approach to astrology. And again, it's what I suppose the premise there is. It's what is the point of predicting the future, or character and destiny for somebody, if you can't actually influence what is going to happen to you? What's the point of saying to somebody, this and this and this, you're going through a difficult time, if you can't also say to somebody, do this and it will help you? So they have mantras, they have chanting, and it's a very, very ancient, very, very established tradition in India that this is the approach you take. So you have practices which remove obstacles from your path, and this comes from the yoga tradition again.
Adam, we've come to that time where you and I have to say so long for now, but I would love to have you back on in the future where we can further discuss astrology. And
I'd love that very much.
Yeah,
thanks so much for having me.
Hey, it's my great pleasure, and get some sleep now, because over in the United Kingdom it's 5 hours later than it is here, so it's your bedtime, my friend. Adam, great meeting you. Thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. And Exonation, if you'd like to contact Adam Smith, his website is www.astrovedas.com. That's www.astrovedas.com. Now, I'll be back on the other side of the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. And our main website, where you can listen to the X-Zone 724 365, is www.xzoneradiotv.com. And you're listening to us on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, Starcom Radio Network, Digital Broadcast Network, and Digital Satellite Network. My name is Rob McConnell. I'll be back on the other side of the news. Don't go away.